Hello everyone, welcome back to the Metatron's channel. Today I'd like to talk about swords again, and in particular I'd like to address a specific topic, which is the topic of balanced swords, balanced blades, balanced sword. Now there are several ways to understand if a sword is balanced or not, but the easiest one is actually to find its point of balance and also try to understand whether it's balanced or not. And that's also one way to understand what kind of sword is and what it's supposed to do, how we are supposed to use it, and also if it's well made or not. Now, one thing that I commonly see is people who don't really know how to understand if a sword is a good sword or not, is a lot of people take a sword in their hands for the first time and they do this, okay? They try to look at something and they do this because they have seen perhaps sword masters and sword makers and blacksmiths doing this. But they don't understand why they do it. They just copy them and they say, this sword is it's quite well balanced. But you can't understand if a sword is well balanced by looking at it like this. What you do when you look at it like this, you're basically seeing other things, which I will talk about in other videos, as for example, how the blade has been forged. So you can actually see if there is a difference between the beginning of the sword, which should be thicker, and the end of the sword, which should be actually this part here, which should be thinner. Now we'll talk about this another time when I will talk specifically about blades, but today I'd like to talk about balancement. So how do I understand if a sword is well balanced or not? You simply have to find the point of balance with your hands, okay? Now, to understand if a sword is well balanced, what you need to do is simply understand this very simple thing, and that is the fact that we should normally have, on a cutting weapon, to have a good cutting sword, you need to make sure that there are at least kind of 6 inches from the hilt. That's a good cutting sword. Why? Simply because you have a little bit more weight on the blade, and that actually makes it a good cutting weapon, okay? Now, if the sword is actually a thrusting sword, like the ones for modern fencing or the rapiers, for example, then you normally talk about 2 inches from the guard, and occasionally you do find swords that are actually balanced at the guard. I'm not particularly fond on those kind of swords, I mean the ones balanced at the hilt. But I do like the fencing swords because I am a fencer myself, and I have to say that when the reason why the fact that they only have they balanced 2 inches from the hilt makes them a better thrusting weapon is because having a lighter blade compared to the hilt gives you more control and they are easy to maneuver. Alright, and since in modern fencing what you normally do is you thrust most of the time, so you can also cut, and that's why I don't particularly like swords which are balanced at the hilt, because that wouldn't make a good cutting weapon at all. It would only be used for thrusting. But the ones that they balance 2 inches from the hilt are very good for for maneuvering and for these kind of things, stabbing and these kind of attacks, and I like that. I like the idea of being able to control my blade well. But again, high medieval swords, long swords, were balanced 6 inches from the hilt to have a better cutting weapon, because that extra weight will make a better cut, a deeper cut. Okay, now let's have a look at some other swords. And just to make sure we understand, hilt is the whole thing, okay? From here to here. Guard is only this part. It's a Japanese sword. Now you see, it's actually 7 or 8 inches from the hilt. And the reason why is that normally, as you probably already know, Japanese swords are good for cutting. They are good weapons for thrusting as well, but you have to understand that the thrusting, what you call the tsuki in Japanese, was introduced later in Japanese swordsmanship. And traditionally, Japanese prefer to cut with their weapon. Okay, so this is a katana. With a katana, basically you cut most of the time. So it's a sword created for cutting, and that makes it better with these kind of, it kind of gives it Plus it's curved, as you know, they're not slightly curved, not amazingly curved, but they're slightly curved. And that also is to increase cutting power. So it's a weapon invented but mostly for cutting, and we can see that also through its balancement, which also, I have to say that it depends, you know, on the katana. There are katanas that actually balance a little bit closer to the hilt, but not that close, because they're still cutting weapon. But the reason is that the reason why most katanas actually balance a little bit further away from the hilt compared to European swords is not really the fact that the blades are thicker, because as you know, European swords blades are thicker, but the fact is that the hilt is lighter. Okay, it's a lot smaller. So that also makes a difference, but still they will balance around here. Here is another example of a longsword, European longsword, and this is actually a replica of the sword of Aragorn from the Lord of the Rings. So it's not an extremely well done, well made replica, I have to say, because the blade is basically one piece of steel. I have better ones, as you see. So again, we are around 6 inches from the hilt. Okay, and here is another one. This is a better replica. It's a much better replica. This was made in Florence with Spanish steel, and it's actually better. It's closer to the real way of forging blades, and again 6 inches from the blade. In this case it's maybe a little less, maybe 5 inches from the blade in this case, 5 inches from the hilt in this case. Still really excellent cutting weapon in this case, well made longsword. Now let's have a look at a sword which is very nice as far as the looks are concerned, but as a replica of a sword it's a extremely bad replica. I still like it, you know, it's looks good, but as a sword it wouldn't be good. Why? First of all, let's have a look at this. Okay, so why is this sword not a good sword? First of all, look at the grip. The grip is not good because it's circular, it's round, and that's normally, you do find it historically occasionally, but most of the times it would be oval shaped, because that would be much more ergonomic, and you would have actually what's called a tang here, which is a little bit, you know, thicker part, which you can find on other swords. This one here, as you can see, it's not cylindrical, it's not round, but it has a tang here in the middle of the grip, which actually it's much easier to use it. In this case, it's a lot harder to control it. Secondly, it's very heavy because of this fantasy hilt, the crossguard. The guard is not good at all, because it's not a guard. It's not going to guard me from anything, because you don't have quillons here. So the enemy attack will cut my hands, and that will not make me very happy at all. So this is not, it's purposeless, it's very heavy, and it's going to change the point of balancement. So it's absolutely worthless, and it's very, very heavy. So this piece here makes this weapon the weight of a two-handed sword with a handle good for one hand. Let's see the balancement. As you can imagine, if I try 6 inches, it falls because this is very heavy. I need to go all the way up to 2.5, 3 inches. 3 inches. So that means that as a cutting weapon, this is not going to be good at all, because in order to recover from this, it's very heavy to handle, and I can't stop myself. Not that it would be easy to stop myself anyways, but in this case very bad. But again, maybe thrusting is the only thing you can do here, but not a very good weapon, I'm afraid. So this is also from the Lord of the Rings, but fantasy, what can you do? Anyways, I hope this helps in some ways. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.